Hello, everyone. This is the third part of our three-part webinar series on business succession, working with the town of Whitby. I am Michael Norris. I'm a senior director here at Impact ON, and we are working on business succession planning, helping support you and to give you the ideas and the parameters of how to do a business succession when you are thinking about that now. So in the first part of our webinar, we talked about assessing the business, maximizing its value, identifying successor, those tax and capital gains implications. In the second part of the webinar, we talked about management and leadership transition and what are the legal aspects to consider of a business succession. Then lastly, in this part, we're going to be talking about some of the case studies and some of the opportunities that present themselves in the modern contemporary business succession environment. We're going to talk about co-ops. We're going to talk about grantor trusts. We're going to talk about employee ownership trusts. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. So some case studies, the real examples of successions, as we say. We work a lot on co-ops. We see a huge value add in co-ops as a business succession model. Why? Because they rely on multiple stakeholders. They rely on multiple members. And as a result of that, they tend to be more sustainable, very effective, continuous businesses. So for those of you who may not know what a co-op is, who have maybe only heard of co-op housing, like any other business, co-ops have clients, employees, and suppliers. Okay? They're just like any other business in that sense. They can be nonprofit or for-profit. And a co-op is formed when one or multiple stakeholders that I've mentioned above, the clients, employees, or the suppliers, own the business collectively, okay? What is the advantage of this? There's huge business flexibility advantages. Founders that want to divest but stay involved in a limited capacity as a member have preferred shares or common shares, membership shares as we call them in the co-op world, can stay involved in a limited capacity. They don't need to completely sell out of the business. And I can't tell you how many business founders I meet with who want exactly that reality. They want to be able to continue the business and to bring it on to someone else who can ultimately make it thrive, and that they want to stay on in a very, very limited role because it's something that has meant a lot to them for a very long time. Co-ops are optimal structures for environments and instances of market failure. Okay, that's one of those things to understand. If you're in a super competitive environment, co-ops might not be the best structure for you. That depends. They're great for kind of the food service and the grocery sector right now with rising living costs. There's a huge instance of market failure there, so there's opportunities for cooperatives as well as the housing crisis. Like I said, there are lots of housing cooperatives. One of the things to consider about the co-op model is that it's impossible to take unilateral decisions. And this is one of the reasons why people like to create sole property-owned corporations, is because the buck stops with you, you can make the decision. But given that there is a co-ownership that is made up of the membership, obviously those decisions need to take place at an all-members meeting or at a board meeting, evidently. One of the advantages of that is that you're less prone to make mistakes. So 80% of cooperatives survive their first 5 years of operation versus 44% of traditional businesses. This is Quebec data, but I mean that is remarkable. It's a remarkable difference. It also, one of the reasons that you might want to consider the co-op model is no one knows your business better than you, your clients, your employees, or your suppliers. So why not consider an option that brings them all into the fold and sells to them? Co-ops also tend to be more risk averse because they're making those decisions collectively. And one of the things that I like to recommend is for those who are just discovering the cooperative model and who maybe have some questions about it, wondering whether the co-op model is right for you, the best thing that you can do is talk to your employees, clients, and suppliers. If any multiple of those stakeholders want to have an interest in your business, a business interest, then a co-op model might be the right way to go. Give you an example of a business succession that was conducted into a cooperative. So this is in Moonbeam, Ontario. This is a grocery store in that small community where in 2012, the Leonard and Leonard grocery store closed. It was owned by a single gentleman who was getting rather old, couldn't operate the business anymore, ended up closing it down. retroactively or retrospectively, the community decided we cannot live without a grocery store. We will band together and we will purchase it. And so at the time in 2013, our business, Impact ON, supported them with a feasibility study and a business plan for the cooperative conversion, and facilitated the cooperative conversion of that grocery store, which is still operating and is growing. So in 2021, we conducted a market study, feasibility study, and a business plan for the Moonbeam Grocery Cooperative. And we helped them raise money in 2022 with an offering statement submitted to financial regulators and capital raised. And on September 18, 2023, just last year, they announced a 10,000 square foot expansion, which on the left, that's the property where the expansion will materialize. And on the right, that is an aisle of the grocery store that, as you can see, it is very well stocked. Another model that you might want to consider for a little bit more control after you've left is grantor trusts. These are very interesting and relevant for those who are maybe trying to keep it in the family but want a certain element of control. Just another meme and joke for those who watch Succession. Maybe you've picked it up since our first webinar. What is a grantor trust? It's a trust that holds business interests. So it might hold a limited liability, a partnership, or a corporation. They're typically used in estate planning to exert control over a business after the founders have moved on. The benefit of keeping it in a trust is if there is something that you absolutely want the business to do when you are gone, if you put it in a trust and you set the parameters, the rules of that trust in a certain way, then that trust can only be executed based on those rules. It avoids disruption of the business in the case of unforeseen circumstances. So if you put a business into a grantor trust with a plan and a power of attorney in place, evidently that business continues after your departure. There's not necessarily people asking, what do we do once you're no longer at the helm? But there is very much a plan in place, and there's someone who is executing those plans for you. Transferring the business into the grantor trust is often called funding the trust. That's probably a term that some of you have heard before, but it's just transferring the assets and the equity of that business into the trust. And the business assets are managed by a trustee who is named by the grantor. Okay, so that trustee is responsible for managing the effects and the rules of that trust once you are no longer here. There are a few advantages to using a grantor trust. So you avoid probate for the business. You can reduce or eliminate estate taxes when there's a business succession or a business transfer. Business continuity when the owner dies or becomes incapacitated because those rules are in place well before that instance happens. You can also help separate the business assets from personal assets, similar to a limited liability company. And then there's even greater privacy than a limited liability, since public filings are not required for a business trust. Okay, you can also, if you put assets in a trust, you can protect them from creditors if that's something that you want to kind of hedge yourself against. And there's a simpler formation process than some traditional business structures as well. Employee ownership trusts, sustainable tax saving model. Okay, this is something that is fairly new in Canada, but it has evolved quite successfully in the US that I wanted to share with you. And this is just a little description of how it works. It works in the exact same way as a grantor trust when it comes to funding. The company is transferred in to the employee ownership trust, and evidently there is a transfer of shares, and ultimately the benefits of that trust are paid out to the employees who have funded and contributed the business to the employee ownership trust through its financing. So it's a Canadian resident trust that holds the shares of the qualifying business for the benefit of employees. All right. And those employees can facilitate the succession and promote employee ownership of small and medium-sized businesses. There are certain research studies that have been released very recently that show that employee ownership works, that it ensures continuity and the sustainability of businesses, especially small and medium businesses. And there are some considerable tax advantages that are being put in place these days by the federal government in order to be able to support the development of employee ownership trusts, and they draw on successful models implemented in the US and the UK. So the proposed employee ownership trust rules will allow employees to borrow from the business to finance a buyout with an extended repayment period or a longer capital gains deferral period for retiring owners. This is intended to help employees overcome the challenges of financing the acquisition, which is always the hardest part when you're selling to employees, because generally the employees don't have sufficient personal savings to be able to buy you out completely as an owner. In the 2023 Fall Economic Statement here in Canada, there was a proposal that was adopted to temporarily exempt up to $10 million in capital gains realized on the sale to an employee ownership trust if certain conditions are met, right? And so this change is in response to stakeholder feedback that requested more incentives for business owners to sell to an employee ownership trust, since they'll likely receive payouts over time, and they won't just receive the lump sum payment in a third-party sale situation. And that's one of the considerations here, is that those employees will likely have to finance that acquisition, and as such, that employee ownership trust will be making deposits to the previous owner of that business over a longer period of time. And if that's no problem for you, then great, you can earn up to $10 million in capital gains exemptions, which is nothing to scoff at. A qualifying business is a Canadian-controlled private corporation controlled by a trust where no more than 40% of the directors own 50% of the controlled private corporation's debt or fair market value of any class of shares when or before it becomes controlled by the trust. The controlled private corporation deals at an arm's length and is not affiliated with any persons or partnerships who owns half or more of the debt or the fair market value of the shares before it became controlled by the trust. Okay, so those are just some rules that you must follow that the federal government has set in order to be able to honor that capital gains exemption and the continuity of the employee ownership trust. I'll talk about that in just a moment, because if those rules are not met, then evidently retroactively you could be imposed the capital gains on the part that was primarily exempt, or the employee ownership trust could be at risk of liquidation. So note that for certain individuals, corporations, partnerships, and trusts may be generally considered related or affiliated with each other for tax purposes when there's a controlling interest between them. And talking about the advantage here, obviously I've talked about up to 10 years to claim the capital gains reserve. And so that $10 million is quite advantageous for the business transfer from a tax standpoint. And there's up to 15 years to repay the funds loaned to the employee ownership trust as a part of the share purchase for the employees. So that's quite a long amortization period. EOTs are exempt from the deemed interest benefit rules if it receives a low or non-interest bearing loan from qualifying businesses. From a qualifying business to purchase shares, and the loan is repaid within 15 years. And EOTs are exempt, and this is probably the most important, from the 21-year deemed disposition rule to avoid getting taxed. So just as an FYI, trusts need to be liquidated every 21 years here in Canada, and the capital gains on those trusts in the liquidation need to be realized. Those are rules just to prevent the accumulation of substantial wealth in trusts. But employee ownership trusts will be exempted from this rule. And this is new. And obviously this is a significant advantage because that business can continue to accrue value for its employees without the need or requirement to liquidate at the end of those 21 years. Evidently, the 21-year rule would be reinstated if the trust no longer qualifies as an employee ownership trust. And so that's just something to consider. So in conclusion, after talking about all of this in these three-part webinar series for the town of Whitby, what makes a business sustainable? Okay, we often talk about business sustainability. We often think about sustainable businesses as ones with social, environmental, equitable governance mandates. For me, it's something that transcends individuals. Okay, a sustainable business does not only serve the founder, but it serves the value proposition and the people that use the business. Businesses often orbit around the identity of their founders. They're animated by the passion, the intuition, and the vision that their founders have given them, right? But what happens when that founder is no longer at the helm? It cannot orbit around the identity of the founders anymore, all right? A sustainable business is a business with a succession plan, okay? That's a business that transcends individuals. That is a business that no longer orbits around the identity of its founder and that will maximize shareholder value when you are looking for an exit, okay? What are the components of a succession plan? 4 parts. Identify the stakeholders, the clients, the suppliers, the investors, the members, the people that make up that succession plan, and what are their roles. Document and streamline the processes that make your business valuable. Use technology and to make them more efficient. More efficient means more value. Develop the talent within the business of those individuals that help ensure the continuity and maximize the value of your business to lock in your legacy. Okay? I hope that these are the elements that you have retained from this 3-part series and understand that a succession plan is just a broader part of the transition plan of a business. Okay? There's a whole change management aspect that needs to be discussed as well. So in closing, business succession takes many forms. I hope you've taken that away from this training today. It can take in the form of an individual sale with founder and owner, or it can be collective. It's better to think about business succession before it's too late. If you're tired, or you're in a position where you do not want to run your business anymore and you're looking to get rid of it, you're not going to get the best money on the table. So the worst time to think about business succession is the moment you decide to sell your business. Okay, think about it before and have a contingency plan that's a value add. All right, bring your family, bring your accountant, bring your lawyers, bring your employees into the discussion. Have an open, transparent discussion, because these succession plans are collective ones that involve them too. The best plans stay on your desk, right? They don't get forgotten in a drawer somewhere, but it's something that stays on your desk and that you continually chip away at day to day and week to week. And ask yourself, what did I do this week to bring myself closer to my goal of succession? Okay. A few additional resources as we wrap up today. Make sure that you bring in your accountant, your lawyer into that succession program, to that succession plan rather. Give us a call, give us an email if you have any questions. Some really great resources. One is the Succession Ready podcast. That's done by 2 great succession experts here in Canada. It's available on Spotify. Project Equity is a co-op conversion project in the United States that helps convert small and medium businesses to cooperatives, and specifically worker-owned cooperatives. That's really interesting to check out as well. I've linked all the websites to this presentation here. And the Co-op Convert project is a project based out of the University of Waterloo that does something similar and does some research into cooperative conversions here in Canada as well. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much for listening. Once again, Michael Norris for the town of Whitby. Thank you so much for supporting this webinar. Impact ON was grateful to be able to partner with you to deliver these sessions. Please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. Our contact information is below. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day, wherever you may be.